I believe I may have been arrested for something similar to murder.
On April 23, 2018, a self-proclaimed incel contributed to what he called a beta uprising by tormenting pedestrians for nearly 7 minutes with a rental van. His attack left 10 people dead and another 16 injured. Let's talk about it. Alek Minassian was born on November 3, 1992 to Sona and Vahe Minassian. His mother Sona worked for the IT company Compugen, and his father Vahe was a senior software developer for Rodgers Communications, a large telecommunications company. Alek lived with his parents and older brother in a 2-story red brick house in the Toronto suburb of Richmond Hill. The specific area of Richmond Hill where Alek and his family lived has reputable public schools, nice manicured lawns, and nice homes. Overall, it's a very nice, middle-class neighborhood where you'd want to raise a family. Alek had early dreams of becoming a pilot, but quickly started to show an affinity for technology as he started to grow up in his early years, with his interests falling more in line with his parents' careers. From an early age, his parents knew there was something different about him. Despite being intelligent, he had some odd tendencies that would become glaringly obvious in school. Once Alek was primary school age, that typically being 4 to 6 years old, he attended 16th Avenue Public School, which was just a few blocks away from his home. It's here where he regularly threw temper tantrums and distanced himself from classmates. He was routinely bullied by others in class due to these tantrums and just his general awkwardness. His trouble at school continued on, going into his last few years at 16th Avenue. Alek continued his temper tantrums, but added screaming and animal noises into the mix. He would gather and hoard toys in a specific area and then guard them, so to speak. Anytime one of the other students came near him, he would point at them and screech until they left. Oftentimes when he was bullied, he responded with meows, growls, and barks. Once he got to around middle school age, Alek attended Thornley, a secondary school. It's around this time that Alek was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. His mother got him help from a social service community program known as Helpmate. While his time at Helpmate did in fact help him, they ended up closing due to a lack of funding, cutting off a line of support for him. Surprisingly, Alek was a bit more social at Thornley, a secondary school, making friends in his special needs class, often acting as the class clown. One example is him making jokes, often referring to his Asperger's syndrome as Asperger's syndrome. Outside of this class though, other people were not so friendly, and it was more of the same as the last school, with him getting bullied for making growling noises, with the other kids frequently calling him Chewbacca. Bullies often forced him to approach girls, which inevitably led to him being laughed at and ridiculed by them. This only caused Alek to shy away from girls even more and repeat a phrase that became common to him, almost like his own mantra. I don't like girls. I don't like girls. His high school classmates recall him as being extremely awkward, but ultimately harmless. Alek's parents ended up buying him a computer at around age 15, where he quickly became obsessed with the Halo franchise. He also found online he wasn't bullied as often. With this newfound comfortability, he retreated further and further into the online world, eventually venturing onto subreddits and other forums where he met like-minded individuals that were also having trouble with girls. One of these individuals he had communication with was Elliot Rodger himself, who was responsible for the 2014 attack on Isla Vista, California that resulted in 6 deaths and 14 injuries. Upon graduating high school, while most people were thanking their friends, classmates, family, and teachers, Alek did not. He was glad to be leaving. After high school, Alek went for a computer programming diploma at Seneca's campus at York University. Academically, he thrived here. In other ways, not so much. There was a supposed specific catalyst for the horrific events that unfolded in the 2018 Toronto van attack around this time. In 2013, when Alek was 20 years old, he attended a Halloween party. It didn't go well.
On Halloween of 2013, I was attending a house party, and I walked in and attempted to socialize with some girls. However, they all laughed at me and held the arms of the big guys instead.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of rude. And how did that make you feel?
I felt very angry That they would, because I considered myself a supreme gentleman, I was angry that they would give their love and affection to obnoxious brutes.
Really.
This event deepened Alek's interest in misogynistic forums, with his interest spiking even further 7 months later on May 23, 2014, the exact date of Elliot Rodger's attack in Isla Vista, California. It was on this date he joined 4chan and began talking to other like-minded incels such as Chris Mercer, who would go on to commit a mass shooting at an Oregon college in 2015 before taking his own life. It's believed that between the date of Elliot Rodger's attack and Alek's van rampage in Toronto, around 4 years, Alek's incel beliefs festered even further and amplified inside of this online echo chamber.
When did you first, sorry, you mentioned this and I forgot, when did you first go on to 4chan?
2014.
2014, and specifically when in 2014?
May 23, 2014.
And how were you able to remember that?
Because I remember that was a very significant day.
Okay, what was that?
That was when Elliot Rodger decided to essentially commit an uprising, a beta uprising, if you will,
right,
against the Chads and the Stacys.
For quick context in incel lingo, Chads are attractive men typically fitting the jock archetype, and Stacys are what incels view as basically attractive female airheads. Despite Alek's online activities, he was called brilliant by former college classmates and even earned a stint as a research assistant at Seneca's Center for Development of Open Technology. In his free time, he posted lengthy coding lessons to class blogs to assist fellow classmates. He even built an Android app that located free parking spots in an area. However, his academic success did not translate to professional success. He got a job at Too Good Financial as a quality assurance developer, but was fired within 6 months. He got a temp job at another unnamed company, but was never invited back. In September 2017, Minassian abandoned his pursuit of a degree just 1 semester shy of graduation. With the encouragement of his parents, he left home to join the Canadian Armed Forces. It's here he was given the military ID number, which will become relevant later, C23 24 91 61. Within just a few days, his platoon leader, a man I'll refer to from now on as Summerfield, quickly identified him as the weakest link in the platoon. In fact, he questioned how Alek even passed the entrance exam at all. His motor skills left something to be desired. He had trouble coming to complete stops and often fell or stumbled during basic exercises. He also seemed to have no semblance of time management and often fell behind, which caused others to do the same as a result of trying to help him. He was often seen wandering the halls and facilities aimlessly, woefully absent-minded. Alek's tendencies caused him to often get in trouble during inspections. If it wasn't his uniform, it would be his bed, or him being late, or his kit not being packed. It was always something with Alek, which caused his platoon to get group punishments frequently. His platoon resented him for this, a fact that Alek was actually aware of. Getting Alek to do the most basic of tasks and be on time was near impossible. Summerfield would even have him shower with certain portions of his uniform on in order to save time, such as his beret. That helped a bit, but he would still be late and unable to keep time. By the 3rd week of basic training, Alek contracted a common strain of strep throat and went to the infirmary. Summerfield later found him curled in his bed saying, "I don't want to be here anymore." Alek dropped out of army training after 16 days, returning back to Seneca to finish out his last semester, his pride greatly wounded. When his male classmates joked about women they liked and made jokes, Alek would get very awkward, distance himself from them, and temporarily ignore them until the conversation switched to a different topic. As his last semester grew closer to the end, Alek went to job fairs, received resume and interview advice from classmates, all with no results. One student recalled helping Alek with his resume. Alek showed up with dozens upon dozens of pages of detailed notes on every position, every little thing he was a part of, his schooling. The classmate helped Alek get it down to a few pages, but it ultimately didn't result in a job offer. Alek was having trouble finding a job, which is not unusual for fresh graduates, but it seemed to bother Alek to an immense degree. His overall demeanor changed from harmless to extremely agitated. On one of the final days in class, Alek actually got into a fight with another student. Once the fight was broken up, Alek yelled, "F*** you," before stomping out of class. His aggressive behavior seemed to be ramping up more and more. After graduation on April 19th, Alek posted a message to his classmates. "Finally finished college. F*** you all and good riddance. Ha 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 ha. F*** you, good luck finding a job," one student chirped back. They never got a reply from Alek. His classmates were puzzled by his behavior change. What they didn't know is that Alek was planning something big, something terrible. Earlier that month, Alek had paid $400 to reserve a van from Ryder Truck Rental. On the surface, that doesn't sound harmful, but something had been festering online for quite some time on both Reddit and 4chan on Incel-related forums. On the morning of the attack, Alek spent time at home playing a browser game known as City Jumper. At approximately 11:25 a.m., Alek left his house, walked to a nearby bus stop, boarded the bus, and got off near the Ryder rental facility afterwards. Alek walked into the truck rental facility wearing black pants, a black hoodie, and a royal blue t-shirt. The attendant noted his hair had random shaved bald patches all over, which was odd but not alarming. He handed the attendant his license for the background check, which came back totally clean. He then repeatedly told the attendant that he was just going to load the van with furniture. Even when unprompted, he kept repeating this statement. He was also very visibly nervous. Shortly afterwards, after receiving the keys, Alek found himself behind the wheel of the rental van that he didn't even know how to put into drive. This specific van was one that Alek had researched beforehand and had even requested, stating that he needed something bigger than a car that would still do damage, but also be maneuverable at the same time.
I was at Seneca College, and I decided to phone Ryder and book either a truck or a van with them. And they had a 10-foot van available, so I figured that this is perfect. I can it's big enough to have an effect, but not too big that I can't maneuver with it. So the van was the perfect medium size to use as my weapon.
Right on, okay.
Upon doing some digging for pictures of the exact model, it looks like the shifter is somewhere around the wheel, probably causing the confusion. Either way, Alek didn't know what to do and he flagged down a nearby sales rep. The rep climbed into the front seat and gave him a quick rundown. The rep noted that his hands were visibly shaking and he looked extremely nervous. She just chalked this up to awkwardness. After the rep departed, Alek sat in the parking lot for about 20 minutes pondering his life and what he was about to do. He whipped out his phone and posted a final message to Facebook. Private Recruit Minassian, Infantry 00010, wishing to speak to Sergeant 4chan, please. C23 24 91 61. The Incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. All hail the Supreme Gentleman Elliot Rodger. As the automatic gates to the facility opened and Alek departed, the employees were inside all laughing at him. They'd never seen anyone not know how to put one of their rental vans into drive before. What follows is unfortunately around 7 minutes of pure terror. Alek made his way to Yonge Street, a highly populated shopping and business area frequented by a good deal of pedestrians, which is exactly where he had planned to be. When I say planned to be, he planned on the attack to take place somewhere on Yonge Street but didn't have a specific target until he reached the intersection of Yonge and Finch. It's here where he saw hundreds of people walking, shopping, and going about their day. This was now his target. As he was sitting at a red light, it went green, and in that moment, all hell broke loose. Alek told himself that now was the time. He accelerated the van, then jerked the wheel and mounted a nearby curb, instantly hitting a group of people and immediately killing one of them. People started fleeing in every direction, running away from the van and taking refuge behind obstacles and inside of any nearby stores they could get to in time. Alek was driving with reckless abandon, hitting light poles, mailboxes, and benches in order to just hit more people. He did this for multiple blocks, smashing into anyone he could along the way. Someone started trying to get Alek to stop and began following him in their own vehicle, but they were unable to do anything as Alek was now going an average of 43 miles per hour through the busy area. Outside Mel Lastman Square, he struck another group of people, swerved from the sidewalk to the road and back on the sidewalk again, then hooked a right onto Ponce Avenue. By the time Alek reached Ponce Avenue, the van was severely damaged and began smoking. Alek could no longer see out of his window due to the smoke, but mostly due to someone's drink that splashed across his front window as he hit them. In fact, that latter part is the only reason he stopped. He stated that he didn't want to risk crashing the van due to not being able to see. I guess on top of not knowing how to put the van into drive, he also didn't know where the windshield wipers were, thankfully.
I continue doing that until, in fact, actually, to be honest, the only reason I stopped my attack was because someone's drink got splashed on my windshield, and I was worried that I would crash the van anyway. So I decided, okay, now I wanted to do more, but I've kind of been foiled by a lack of visibility. So then that's when I turned right, and I saw the cops approaching, so I decided to pull over and get out of my van.
Okay.
It's crazy. A person's decision to buy a $2 soft drink that day saved potentially dozens of lives. If that drink hadn't been splattered across his window, he admitted he would have just kept driving into people. With his visibility ruined and cops quickly approaching him, Alek got out of the van. In that moment, Constable Ken Lamb pulled up in his police cruiser a few dozen feet from the van, getting out and brandishing a gun. Alek pulled out what looked to be a gun from his pocket and held it out, pointing it in Ken's direction, demanding the officer shoot him. He tried to repeatedly act like he was drawing a weapon in order to bluff the officer into shooting him, but Ken wasn't buying it. When he first caught sight of the object, he took cover behind his police cruiser, believing that in fact it was a gun. However, after a minute, Ken quickly learned that what Alek was holding was not a gun, but a wallet. Ken then put away his pistol, opting to switch to a baton, and started approaching Alek. With his ruse blown, Alek relented, threw his wallet to the side quickly, and placed himself face down, where he was cuffed and arrested just around 7 minutes after the initial 911 call came through. 10 people died in the attack. They ranged in age from 22 to 94, with 8 of them being women. An additional 16 people were injured, with injuries ranging from severe scrapes and bruises all the way to permanent organ and spinal damage. Ken Lamb was seen as a hero by the community for not only apprehending Alek, but also his measured use of force, not allowing Alek to avoid justice. Ken stated he was simply doing his job. Businesses in the immediate area of the police investigation, for the most part, decided to close entirely, with a few choosing to remain open from the back entrances as the storefronts were now being obstructed by police presence. The Toronto subway and bus services were closed or rerouted until the following day, and professional sporting events in the area had concrete barriers erected around the outside of the venues in fear of there being another attacker. It took a few days for everything to continue operating at a relatively normal level. Alek's van attack became the deadliest attack in Toronto's history and one of Canada's worst mass murder events. As news coverage of the Toronto van attack spread, Alek's parents saw their son was responsible and were rightfully devastated. Sona had to take leave from work, and Vahe was immensely disturbed by his son's actions. Just 2 months later, they sold their family home and chose to move. On the opposite end of that, sections of the online Incel community actually praised Alek's actions, with some even deeming him Saint Alek and creating makeshift shrines of him. Citizens of Toronto gathered in various places to mourn those they had lost in the violent attack. Candlelight vigils were held to honor their lives. As of this video, a permanent memorial to those lost in the attack is still being worked on. 9 hours after the attack, during a police interview, Alek enlightened a detective about incel culture and what is likely one of the weirdest interviews he's ever experienced.
And so it was Elliot Rodger who was the father of
basically
this.
the founding forefather of the entire movement.
Right. So explain to me this movement. What's this movement about?
It's basically a movement of angry incels such as myself who are unable to get laid. Therefore, we want to overthrow the Chads, which would force the Stacys to be forced to reproduce with the incels.
Right. Okay. When you say incels,
involuntary celibate.
I really appreciate you talking. I'm going to be straight up with you. I find you fascinating. I really do. I've never met somebody like you before. And this has been quite an experience for me.
Alek was ultimately charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder. The trial began on November 10, 2020 via Zoom and concluded on March 3, 2021. Vahe attended his son's trial. Just by looking at the photos, his facial expression says it all, and it really does make you feel horrible for not only the victim's friends and family, but Alek's own family as well. Alek pled not guilty. He admitted he did in fact drive the van and crash into people on that fateful day. However, his defense team tried to argue that his actions were due to him being on the autism spectrum and were completely out of his control. This enraged local autism advocacy groups who said it would further stigmatize people with the disorder. Autism Ontario had this to say: "In reality, people on the autism spectrum and with other disabilities are much more likely to be victims of crime rather than the perpetrators. The myth that autism causes criminal behavior is exactly that, a myth. By the end of the hearing, Alek was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. 3.5 years after the attack, on October 28, 2021, an 11th person died from Alek's attack. 65-year-old Amaresh Tesfamariam passed away in the hospital from her injuries. She fought hard over the course of 3.5 years after the attack, but the damage ended up being far too much. She was bedridden ever since the vicious attack and suffering immensely, but never stopped asking about how the other families were doing and how they were holding up. On June 13, 2022, after being pushed back for some time, Alek Minassian had his official sentencing hearing. It was very emotional, with friends, family, and victims coming forth to give their impact statements. Some survivors of the attack say they now live with survivor's guilt and PTSD because of Alek's actions. The judge stated that she considered Amaresh an 11th murder victim. By the end of the hearing, Alek Minassian was found guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. A month later, a notice of appeal was filed on Alek's behalf, arguing among other things that the trial judge misapprehended expert evidence and made unreasonable findings. Needless to say, it didn't work, and Alek remains behind bars with his sentencing unchanged. Hey, if you want to see more mini-crime documentaries, subscribe to keep up with future ones, and be sure to leave a like and comment, as this is a new channel and can use all the help it can get. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.